Hey friends, it's Sharon from Sugar Plum Studio. Thank you so much for joining me today for cupcake decorating. One of the kits that we had available for sale on our website this week was our Buttercream cupcake basket kit. And this video is going to show you how to put all of those components together and pipe beautiful buttercream blooms on your cupcakes. Now, before we get started, you will need to get a pair of scissors because we do still need to trim those piping bags down just a little bit. And then I always like to have a wet towel or a paper towel nearby so I can keep my hands nice and clean in case I get any buttercream on them. Because first and foremost, when you are working with food or making a food project, your number one job is to make sure that you don't put your germs on it. So we're going to start with nice clean hands and make sure that we avoid licking our fingers while we are working. All right, now if you've never piped buttercream flowers before, first and foremost, I want you to relax. Don't worry about it. A lot of people are intimidated about piping flowers. Now, there is more than enough icing in these piping bags to pipe all 12 of your flowers. So you do have plenty to do some practice pipes, and we are going to do some practice pipes with each of these different tips that we're going to put on our bags. Now, the bags are fitted with these white pieces. These are called couplers. So these are yours to keep and they are absolutely reusable. So the purpose of a coupler is so that you can change piping tips on a bag. So if we do a particular flower in yellow and you decide that you want to do that same type of flower in pink, you'll be able to put that piping tip on that bag as well. So it's two pieces. You have this little collar that goes onto this inner piece, and then it screws down like this, and that's what holds the tip in place. All right, so since I have yellow, I might as well start with yellow. So the first thing I want to do is unscrew that coupler collar, and I want to trim this bag down to the white inner piece of that coupler piece. So the reason that we leave these tips a little bit further is because we don't want the buttercream to dry out before it gets to you, and it's easier to fill the bag with icing if we can squeeze a little bit of air out. Otherwise, we can only fill the bag about halfway, and we want to make sure that you have enough buttercream. All right, so the tip that I'm going to put on this particular bag is the leaf tip. So this is what the leaf tip looks like. It's that little V-shaped notch. So I'm going to place that on top of the white inner piece, and then I'm going to take that collar and I'm going to screw that on, make sure it's nice and secure. You want to make sure that those threads are even. Otherwise, what's going to happen is when you squeeze, this is going to pop off and the icing is going to kind of explode out of the bag. Now, when I hold this bag, I want to hold it so that I can't see the notch. So if you see, if I turn the bag this way, I can see that V-shaped notch. I don't want to be able to see it when I'm looking down. So I'm going to hold the bag this way so that I can't see that notch. So I'm going to grab one of my cupcakes. Now, it doesn't matter which flavor you use. If you want to do a few practice pipes on a paper towel or a paper plate before you do this directly on your cupcake, you certainly can. So I'm going to start kind of towards the middle, and I'm not going to touch the tip to the cupcake. I thought an overhead view would work much better for this. I'm not going to touch the tip to the cupcake. I want to go slightly above, and I'm going to start squeezing. I always hold my bag all the way up the top towards the rubber band. So I'm going to start squeezing until the icing makes contact with the cupcake, and I'm going to keep squeezing, and I'm going to pull my hand away as I squeeze. When I get to the tip of the cupcake, I'm going to stop squeezing, or the edge of the cupcake rather, and pull my hand away pretty quickly. All right, so I'm going to keep doing that all the way around the cupcake. Making petals of a flower. Now I'm going to do one layer, and then I'm going to go back, and in between all of those petals, I'm going to do a second layer. Now I'm not worried about the very center of my cupcake, and I'm not worried about all this area that's exposed around the side of my cupcakes, because once I have all of my cupcakes finished and I place them inside my berry basket, then I'm going to go back with my green and I'm going to detail and add green and leaves and fill in all of those spots. All right, so this is just a really, really simple flower. And that's actually the same technique that we use for leaves. So once you have this shape down with this tip, then you'll know exactly how to do a leaf as well. All right, so You can certainly stop this video at any time if you want to practice or to do the other ones. I'm just going to demonstrate one of each kind. So you can certainly stop and rewind and watch that again. All right, so I'm going to set that one aside, set my yellow bag aside. Now I'm going to go to my pink bag. Same thing, I'm going to unscrew the collar of that coupler and trim that plastic piece down. You always want to make sure you know exactly where those plastic pieces are going if you're ever cutting piping bags. The last thing you'd want is for that to wind up in someone's cupcake. All right, so next I'm using the petal tip, which is the number 104 on the side of your tip. So this is the petal tip. It has like a little teardrop shape, if you can see inside, like that. So I'm going to put that on top and then screw that collar down. And I want to make note that, if this is the first time you're ever piping flowers, it takes a long time and a lot of practice to get really good at it. So, if you're really worried about it, just like I said, take your time, know that you need to get some practice. And if you start to get frustrated, put it down, walk away, take a break, and then come back. You certainly don't have to do this all in one shot. All right, so the way that you hold this piping bag, again, you're gonna be holding it so that you can't see the opening. But if you were looking at it yourself, if you were, turning the bag to look at you, you'd see the narrow end of the teardrop at the top and the wide end at the bottom, right? So what I'm gonna do is just turn my hand so that the bag is gonna be sideways like this, right? And the wide end is pointed towards me, and the small tip, the small point, is pointed away from me. All right, and what I'm gonna do is pipe loops. All right, so I'm gonna start in the middle of the cupcake. And again, I'm holding the bag kind of parallel to the cupcake, but not touching the surface. All right, so I'm gonna pipe loops. So I'm gonna go squeeze, squeeze up, squeeze, squeeze, squeezing the whole time, up and down. All right, so how big of a loop you make depends on, how wide that arc is that you make with your hands. So the first few of these always wind up really wonky, and mine are no exception, because you have to kind of get into a groove with these and know how wide and how arced you're gonna, move your hand. So I'm gonna do another one of those so you can see. And one thing I'd like to do is always keep the tips clean, because you do tend to drag buttercream onto them. All right, so I'm gonna start again and make a loop much better. So you see it's kind of like an upside down U or a horseshoe or something like that. All right, and it helps to turn the cupcake while you do this too, so you don't have to turn your hand as much. And then again, just like that yellow flower, I'm gonna go back and put centers in that when I do my green. So you'll see the difference between my first and my second one. You get a little more confident with each one. All right, so that is my pink with the petal tip. All right, so next I'm gonna do this kind of purpley, neon purple. Again, I'm gonna unscrew the ring of the collar of the coupler. I'm gonna trim that bag down. And for this one, I'm gonna be using the mum tip, which is the one that looks like a smile. Number-wise, it is 79. And all of these piping tips are universal from brand to brand. So, it's all a standard universal size. So a 79 is always gonna look like this. If you are adding to your piping tip collection, the numbers are all the same. All right, so I'm gonna take that, squeeze, the icing will start coming out. So again, I'm gonna take my cupcake, I'm gonna hold the bag so that if I'm looking at me, I see a smile. If I point the bag toward me, I see a smile. So again, I'm gonna hold it parallel to the cupcake so that I can see my smile. And I'm gonna start on the outer ring of my cupcake. And this is just a short squeeze, stop, pull away, squeeze, stop, pull away, squeeze, stop, pull away. And you'll see it kind of makes like a scoop or a little like bowl with a spoon shape. So again, I'm not worried about going all the way to the edge of the cupcake because I want to have a little bit of wiggle room when I put these into the basket, because it is a very tight fit in the berry basket. So they are going to touch each other, and we can go back and fill in all of those spots with our green or additional, piping color tips or piping colors here. So then I'm going to move in just a little bit and do a second ring of those. And this tip is for mums. Fitting for Mother's Day, right, mums? Now, as we get towards the center, what I tend to do is, instead of holding the bag parallel to the cupcake, I start to curve in like this, so that the final pipes that I do in the very center are almost straight up and down. So that kind of gives them, a little bit of height, a little bit of dimension. The flower is not so flat. Like that. And then if I find that I have any spots that I want to fill in, like if I can see the cupcake or if I didn't put these too close together, this is a very forgiving piping tip. You can go in there and do that, and it just kind of blends in. And no one will ever know that you filled that spot in. All right, so there's our mum. All right, so then the next flower I'm gonna do is a hydrangea, all right? And I'm gonna be using both the blue and that same kind of purpley neon purple color on this. So the first thing I'm gonna do is set up that blue bag with the drop flower tip. This is the last tip. We have not used this one yet, so this is a drop flower. This is number 131, if I can see those tiny little numbers without my glasses on. And I'm going to trim this bag. All right, and then I'll put that mum tip on, or mum tip, the drop flower tip. Guess I have mums on the brain. All right, and I'll screw that collar on. Sometimes they're a little hard to get on over this plastic, so just be patient in lining it up. All right, and I'm going to take the mum tip off of this bag as well, because what I'm going to be doing is going back and forth between these two colors, so that way it'll be ready. All right, so again, it doesn't matter which flavor you use. So this tip is just like a star tip, if you've ever used a basic star tip. So it's basically a closed star, but it has like a pin or a section that goes through the middle. So what that does is create little ruffly kind of, petals as it squeezes. It's almost a whole flower in and of itself. So this is a very simple squeeze. You just, again, above the surface of the cupcake, you don't want to touch it to the surface because you don't want to clog it up with cake. It's just squeeze, a pretty long squeeze, stop, and pull away. So what I'm going to do is kind of randomly pipe these, intentionally leaving spaces between the colors. And the reason that I do that is because when I change the tip, or change the tip on the bag, so then I'm going to take that same tip, I'm going to grab that neon purpley color, and then I'm going to go back and fill in those spaces. Now my first 3 squeezes are going to be the previous color, so you shouldn't like really worry about that. The first 3 squeezes will come out kind of blue. But what I love most about hydrangeas is that they're always kind of multicolored. They're very, very rarely is it solid blue or solid whatever. So, that makes a really pretty blend of colors. All right, so those are our basic flower shapes. So we have our bloom here. This is kind of, I don't know what kind of flower I would call that. I mean, if it were red, I would definitely call it a poinsettia, but it's kind of sunflower-ish, I would say. So that's the leaf tip that we use for that. And then we have our blossom, which is kind of like an apple blossom, and that's with that petal tip. Then we have our mum, which is that smile shaped tip, and then we have our hydrangea, which is that drop flower. So like I said, you can use these tips and move them back and forth between these bags. So you could do this particular flower in any of the colors. You can do that particular flower, any of the colors. Same with the hydrangeas. If you wanted to do like a green and yellow or a green and pink, that would look really lovely together. You know, anything that you want shape-wise or color-wise rather with each of those tips. So the last thing I'm going to do are my greens. All right, so I'm going to take that green bag and cut the tip off of that. I'm going to do it away from my cupcakes so this plastic piece doesn't land on top of them. And then I'm going to take that leaf tip, which is what we did the yellow flower with, and I'm going to take that off of the yellow bag and place it on the green bag. Now, since I used it on the yellow bag, my first few squirts are going to be a combination of yellow and green. So to the side, I'm just going to keep squeezing until just green is coming out. All right, and then I'm going to use that to pipe some greenery, some leaves on these cupcakes. Now, if you want, you can do this part after you've put them in your basket. So typically when I put them in that basket, I do them on an angle like this. I'll show you. So I'll have cupcakes that aren't decorated to fill in the spot. So I'll do 2, 4, another 4, and then 2 like this. And you have to kind of really fit them in. They're very close up against each other. And then I'll go back and you'll see all of these spaces where the cupcakes are touching, but there's cupcake exposed. Then you can go in and pipe just that same motion that we did for this yellow flower. Squeeze, stop, and pull away. And you can fill all of that area in with green leaves like that. Or you can always opt to not put every cupcake in the basket. There's certainly no rule that says you have to. Quite frankly, if you don't want to use the basket, you don't have to. You can put all of the cupcakes back in the box. This is your art. You get to decide what it looks like, so it's completely up to you how you arrange them. So the very last thing that I want to show you is how to do centers in these flowers. So in your kit, you have an empty piping bag that has no tip. I'm going to use green for my flower centers. So what I'm going to do is unscrew that tip off of that green bag. I'm going to open up this piping bag just by folding it back over in my hand. I'm going to put a squirt of icing into this bag, close it back up, and then I'm going to push that icing down, squeeze it down, and then I'm going to cut just a blunt tip off of this piping bag. Make very certain that you know where that plastic goes. Don't take it over your cupcakes like I did. And then this is just going to give you, you know, a little plain pipe so you can do some dots. So what I would do is pipe, let me show you in my yellow flower, just pipe a series of little dots in the middle of that flower to kind of designate the center, and it really finishes it nicely. And I could do the same with the pink flower. Now, of course, you don't have to do this green. You could certainly do it yellow if you want to do some of the flowers green and then the rest of them yellow. You could do that, pipe a few in green, and then you can squeeze this back into your green piping bag and then repeat it with yellow. The first few squeezes will come out yellow, but then eventually, or will come out green, but then eventually they'll come out yellow. So let's put these all together. Let's add a little bit more of the greenery to our flowers here. Maybe a few leaves for our hydrangea. All right. And there we have it. There are our buttercream floral cupcakes. All right, so keep in mind, it takes a long time and a lot of practice to get really good. You have more than enough buttercream to do lots of practice squeezes on a paper plate or a paper towel before you commit to doing them on your cupcakes. I'm sure they're going to be beautiful. You know, the more you do it, the better you get at them. So it takes some practice, but you will get the hang of it. And you can certainly stop and rewind the video at any point to go over the instructions for each particular flower. So thank you for joining me today for cupcake decorating. I hope that you enjoyed this project. If you did, keep an eye out on our calendar for lots of other fun projects that we have coming up, both in studio and as kits for you to do at home. And until we meet next time, stay safe, take care, wash your hands, and we'll see you soon. Bye.